The knock came just as I was pouring my morning coffee. Sharp. Insistent. The kind of knock that didn't ask for permission, it demanded attention. I wasn't expecting anyone. Not today. Not after the week I'd had. Setting my mug down, I wiped my hands on my robe and walked to the door, exhaling slowly. Whatever this was, I wasn't in the mood. And then I opened it. Samantha. My husband's new girlfriend. The woman he had left me for. The woman he had paraded around town like a prize while I had been left to pick up the shattered pieces of my life. She was grinning. I barely had time to process the sight of her before she spoke, her voice laced with mocking sympathy. You need to start packing, Emily. We're moving in. She tilted her head, eyes gleaming with triumph, and held up a folded piece of paper. A deed? A contract? I didn't know. I didn't need to. Eric didn't tell you, she smirked. This house is his now, so if I were you, I'd start boxing up your things. We're taking over. A slow creeping chill spread through my chest. But not fear. Not anger. Something colder. Calmer. Because she didn't know. She thought she had one. Thought I would cry, beg, maybe even collapse. But she wasn't looking behind her. My lawyer was. I let my lips curl into a smile. As this wasn't just my home. This was my battlefield. It had started months ago. Or maybe, if I was honest, years. Eric and I had been married for 12 years. And for most of that time, I had been the one holding everything together. The one who organized the finances. The one who made sure the bills were paid. The one who kept giving while he slowly pulled away. I had ignored the signs at first. The late nights. The phone that never left his hand. The whispered calls in the next room. But then I saw them. It was supposed to be a girls' night out. A break from the stress of a marriage I was desperately trying to hold on to. But fate had other plans. There they were. In the corner of the restaurant. His hand resting on hers. Laughing like I hadn't seen him laugh in years. And in that moment something inside me snapped. I didn't confront him. Not then. I went home. And I started planning. Because if Eric thought he could humiliate me, if he thought he could take what was mine and walk away unscathed, he was wrong. Samantha's smirk widened as she mistook my silence for shock. I know this is hard for you, Emily, she said, feigning sympathy as she tucked the papers under her arm. But Eric and I are in love. It's time for you to move on. She placed a manicured hand on my doorframe, like she already owned it, like she had already won. I almost laughed. But instead I took a slow step back and gestured for her to come inside. Her brows lifted in surprise. She wasn't expecting that. Hesitant now, she stepped inside. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floors I had chosen, the house I had built, the walls that held years of my life. Behind her my lawyer followed. Silent. Composed. I closed the door. Slowly. Then I turned to face her. Samantha, I said smoothly, savoring every syllable. There's something you should know. Her smirk faltered. A flicker of doubt crossed her face as my lawyer finally made his presence known. The confidence she had waltzed in with, the arrogance of a woman who thought she had everything, was starting to crack. What is this? She asked, her voice not quite as steady now. The real game had just begun. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself before I spoke. You seem so sure of yourself, Samantha. I tilted my head, watching her carefully. Like you think you already own this house. Like you and Eric have outsmarted me. Her fingers tightened around the papers she was holding. A subtle shift in her stance, her weight moving slightly, like she was bracing herself. She was starting to sense something was off. But she wasn't ready to let go of her smug confidence. Eric transferred ownership to himself, she snapped, lifting the document as if it was a shield. He said you didn't have a choice. This house is his now. We checked. I smiled again. Did you? I glanced at my lawyer, who had been silent this whole time, calmly flipping through his folder, unbothered. He adjusted his glasses, his face unreadable. Mrs. Harrison, he said, addressing me formally, ignoring Samantha entirely. Would you like to explain, or shall I? I turned back to her, taking in the flicker of doubt creeping into her expression, the way her confidence was beginning to crumble. Go ahead, I said smoothly. I think she should hear it from a professional. My lawyer cleared his throat, shifting his gaze to Samantha, who was gripping the papers like a lifeline. "Miss Samantha, is it?" He didn't wait for her to answer. The house wasn't Eric's to give away. Silence. Samantha blinked. "What?" "This house," he gestured around us, "was never in Eric's name. Not before, not now, and certainly not in the divorce proceedings." Flicker of something passed over her face, uncertainty, disbelief. But she shook her head, scoffing. "That's not true." Her voice wavered, but she forced a laugh. "Eric told me." "Eric lied," I cut in. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I turned and walked over to the side table near the entrance, picking up the real set of documents. Holding them up between my fingers, I watched as her eyes locked onto them, realization starting to seep in. "This house was mine before I even met Eric," I said, my voice firm, steady. "It was left to me in my grandmother's will. I never added Eric to the deed, no matter how many times he asked." I took a step closer, watching as the color drained from her face. "He had no legal claim to it during our marriage. And he sure as hell doesn't have one now." Samantha's lips parted, but she was silent. For the first time she had no script. No smug retort. No backup plan. "Whatever paperwork he gave you, whatever promises he made, it's worthless." The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating. And then I saw it. The exact moment the truth hit her. Her smugness turned to confusion. Confusion to doubt. And finally panic. Eric had always underestimated me. I remembered the way he used to laugh when I insisted on keeping certain things separate. "Why does it matter?" he would say. "We're married. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine." Except in his mind that had never been true. What was mine was his. And what was his was only his. But now? He had nothing. And Samantha was just starting to realize it. I had seen the signs early on. The way Eric would withdraw money from our joint account without hesitation but flinch when I asked about his personal savings. The way he always made sure our bills were split evenly but never offered to cover a dinner or a weekend getaway. I had ignored it back then. Told myself marriage was about trust, about compromise. I had trusted him. And he had bet on me being too naive, too emotionally wrecked by his betrayal to fight back. But what he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I had been fighting back since the day I saw him with her. Samantha took a shaky breath, her shoulders squaring as she clung to the last threads of the lie she had been fed. "Eric said the house was his," she repeated, but there was no conviction in her voice now, only a growing unease. "He told me he worked it out with the lawyers." My lawyer let out a quiet sigh, closing his folder with a soft thud. "He worked nothing out," he said bluntly. "What he did was attempt to file fraudulent paperwork, which I assume is what you're holding right now." Samantha's grip on the documents loosened, her fingers twitching as she processed his words. I folded my arms and leaned against the counter, letting the silence stretch between us. Some lessons were best learned the hard way. And then she snapped. "That bastard," she muttered under her breath, her voice shaking with anger. I raised an eyebrow. "Is something wrong, Samantha?" She whirled toward me so fast I almost laughed. "He told me this was his house." Her voice was sharp, laced with disbelief. "He said he was throwing you out. He said we could move in and start over." I tilted my head. "And you believed him?" Her eyes flashed, but she didn't answer. She was too busy thinking. Too busy unraveling the truth. If Eric had lied about this, what else had he lied about? She turned to my lawyer, her voice thinner now. "So you're saying legally he has nothing?" My lawyer adjusted his tie, his face impassive. "That's exactly what I'm saying." Samantha inhaled sharply, her grip tightening around her phone. She was calculating, scrambling, deciding her next move. I already knew what she was going to do. She was going to call Eric. She was going to demand answers. And she was going to realize, far too late, that she had hitched her future to a sinking ship. I let the corner of my mouth twitch up in amusement. She thought she was walking into a victory. Instead, she was walking into a lesson. Her hands shook as she scrolled through her contacts, her breath coming in short, furious bursts. She hit dial. The phone rang once. Twice. Then Eric answered. "Hey, babe." His voice rang through the speaker, confident, cocky, completely unaware of the wreckage awaiting him on the other end. Samantha didn't waste a second. "You lying piece of garbage," she shrieked. "You told me the house was yours. That we were moving in. That you threw Emily out." Silence. I could practically hear Eric blinking in confusion on the other end. What?" Samantha spun toward me, eyes blazing. "Tell him." I smirked, took a slow sip of my coffee, and set the mug down with deliberate ease. "Hey Eric," I said smoothly. "Interesting day we're having, huh?" There was a pause. A long one. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted. The arrogance was gone. "What's going on?" Samantha gritted her teeth. "What's going on?" I just showed up at Emily's house, ready to move in like you told me. And guess what, Eric? She turned. "Emily still owns the house." I could almost hear Eric's stomach drop. That's not possible. I filed the paperwork." Samantha cut him off. "You filed nothing." Her voice was pure venom now. "You lied to me." "Why you lied to me?" "You said we'd be starting fresh. You said you took care of everything." Eric's brie, he was realizing, far too late, that his brilliant plan had just fallen apart. And I was enjoying every second of it. "You don't understand," Eric said quickly. I was going to fix it," Samantha scoffed. "Fix it? You told me we had nothing to worry about. You said you got everything in the divorce." Everything. Oh, Eric. You poor delusional man." I crossed my arms, tilting my head slightly as if I were considering his options for him. "Eric, let me make this easy for you." I took a slow step forward, letting the weight of my words sink in. "You didn't get the house. You didn't get the business. You didn't even get the joint account you tried to drain." I turned to Samantha, whose breath hitched. She was gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "And that car you've got," she added, her voice laced with something between disbelief and disgust. "What is it, a 10-year-old sedan?" Silence. Then a bitter, humorless laugh spilled from Samantha's lips. She shook her head, eyes flashing with rage. "Oh my God, you really have nothing." I watched the shift happen in real time, the flicker of realization, the slow unraveling of whatever illusion she had been living under. Eric wasn't the prize she thought he was. Her breath came in sharp, uneven bursts as she started pacing, heels clicking against the floor. "I left everything for you, Eric." Her voice trembled, and for the first time since she walked in, it wasn't with arrogance. "I believed in you. I trusted you." Eric was still scrambling, trying to grab hold of a situation that had already slipped through his fingers. "Baby, listen. Don't you dare baby me." She whirled on the phone, voice rising. "You told me we'd be living in a beautiful house. You told me we'd be set for life." A sharp inhale. "And now you're telling me we have nothing?" "That I have nothing." She was unraveling fast, and I wasn't about to stop her. I leaned back against the counter, arms folded, watching the scene unfold like a spectator at the best performance of my life. Eric's voice grew more desperate. "Samantha, come on. We're in this together." She let out a sharp, hollow laugh. "No, Eric. You dragged me into this mess." Her voice dripped with venom. "I didn't sign up to be broke and homeless with you." Then suddenly, her fury swiveled back to me. Eyes wild, shoulders tense. "You planned this." Her voice was accusing now, desperate. "You wanted me to find out like this." I shrugged. "I didn't force you to show up at my house uninvited, Samantha. That was all you." Her lips parted, then clamped shut. She had no comeback for that. Because she knew deep down this was her own doing. She had bought into his lies, walked into this willingly. And now? She was paying the price. She turned back to the phone, her entire body vibrating with rage. "I should have known," she seethed. "You didn't love me. You just needed someone stupid enough to go along with your little fantasy." Eric's voice cracked with panic. "Samantha, please." Click. She hung up. For a moment she just stood there, staring at the phone in her hand like it was a dead thing. Like the weight of her choices had finally caught up to her. Then I can't believe I fell for him." I met her eyes, and for the first time I saw something I recognized. Not arrogance. Not entitlement. Just regret. "It happens," I said simply. She exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over her face. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and walked out. I didn't call after her. I didn't feel sorry for her. She had made her choices. Now she had to live with them. I watched from the doorway as she stormed down my driveway, phone clutched in her shaking hand. She had walked in thinking she was stepping into her new life. Instead, she had walked straight into a reality check. I turned back to my lawyer, who was still calmly flipping through his notes, as if we hadn't just watched a woman's entire world collapse in real time. He finally looked up, adjusting his glasses. Well, he mused. That was entertaining. I let out a small laugh, shaking my head. She really thought she won. My lawyer smirked. That's what happens when people believe the wrong person. I closed the door, locking out the past for good. Barely had time to take a sip of my now cold coffee before my phone buzzed. Eric. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. A part of me wanted to ignore him, to let him stew in his mess. A part of me wanted to ignore the call, to let him stew in the mess he created. But another part of me, one that craved the satisfaction of hearing him struggle, picked up. I kept my voice steady. What do you want, Eric? His breathing was uneven, laced with frustration and something else, panic. Emily, whatever you told Samantha, you need to fix it. She just called me screaming, saying I ruined her life. You made me look like an idiot. I smirked, swirling my coffee with a spoon. Eric, you did that all on your own. Silence. Then his tone shifted, grasping for something, anything to hold on to. Listen, let's talk. We don't have to fight like this. We were married for 12 years, Emily. You can't just throw me away like I'm nothing. I almost laughed at the sheer hypocrisy of it. Oh, but you could throw me away? My voice was colder now, sharp and unyielding. You could walk out, drain our accounts, move on with your younger upgrade, and expect me to just accept it? That's different, he snapped, his desperation beginning to seep through. I made mistakes, okay? But I was hurt too. We weren't happy. I let his words settle in the silence between us. Are you happy now, Eric? More silence. But this time it was heavier. I already knew the answer. As much as I wanted to end the call and erase his voice from my life forever, there was one last thing I needed to say. By the way, Eric, I said, keeping my tone light, casual, as if we were discussing the weather. I heard him swallow. And your petition to revisit the divorce settlement? I paused, letting it hang, letting him hope. The judge dismissed it. Again. His frustration turned to outright rage. This isn't fair, Emily. You set me up. You planned this whole thing behind my back. I couldn't help but smile. No, Eric. I let out a slow breath. I just paid attention. And with that I hung up. I expected that to be the last time I'd have to deal with him. I was wrong. 2 days later there was another knock at my door. This time it wasn't Eric. It was Samantha. But there was no smug grin. No condescending tone. She looked defeated. Her usually flawless makeup was smudged, mascara slightly streaked beneath her eyes. Her perfectly styled blonde waves were tangled, like she hadn't even bothered to fix them. She stood there, arms crossed over herself, shifting her weight like she wasn't sure if she should even be here. I leaned against the doorframe, folding my arms. Samantha. My voice was neutral, unreadable. What do you want? She hesitated, looking down, then back up at me. And then she did something I never expected. She apologized. I was stupid, she whispered, voice cracking. I believed him. He told me you were cold and controlling, that you didn't support him. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. I thought I was different, that he wouldn't do to me what he did to you. I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. But you were right. Her eyes met mine, raw and unguarded. Everything you said. He used me. He took my money, maxed out my credit cards. And when I asked him to help with rent, she swallowed hard. He told me I was too much to handle, that I was holding him back. And just like that, Samantha had become me. I exhaled, studying her carefully. So what now? I asked. Are you running back to him? She let out another bitter laugh, shaking her head. No. I'm done. She paused, shifting on her feet. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I watched her for a long moment. I wasn't sure if I forgave her, but I did understand her. And maybe that was enough. I nodded, stepping back. Good luck, Samantha. She gave me a small, sad smile. And then she walked away. That night I sat in my living room with a glass of wine, staring at the city lights through my window, reflecting on everything that had happened. I had thought revenge would feel different, that when Eric finally hit rock bottom, I'd feel a rush of victory. But the truth? I didn't feel anything for him anymore. I had won because I had moved on, because I had built something of my own. And Eric? He was still stuck in the same cycle of self-destruction. And for the first time, that wasn't my problem anymore. My lawyer sent one final update. Eric had applied for a new credit card. Denied. He tried to get a loan. Denied. He was drowning. And for once, I wasn't going to save him. I lifted my glass in a quiet toast to no one in particular. Good luck, Eric. And just like that, I closed the chapter on him forever. The morning was crisp and still as I stepped into my boutique, the little shop Eric had once mocked. The bell above the door chimed softly, a welcoming sound, not just to customers but to me. For the first time in years I felt free. No more legal battles. No more phone calls from my ex. No more shadows of the past creeping in to steal my peace. I had won. Not in the way Eric had feared. Not with screaming or vengeance. But by simply living well. I had outgrown him and nothing felt better than knowing that. Weeks passed. I hadn't heard from Eric since our last conversation, the one where he begged me to fix things for him. I assumed he had finally given up. Then this morning I saw it. A message from an unknown number. I didn't need to open it to know who it was. Eric. Emily, I messed up. I know you probably hate me, but I need help. I lost my job and I have nowhere to go. Can we just talk, please? I stared at the screen waiting for the anger to come. The resentment. The old familiar urge to scream about how unfair it was that even now, after everything, he still thought he could use me. But I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. I deleted the message. And just like that, he was gone. No more Eric. No more past. Just my future. A week later, Samantha walked into my boutique. She hesitated near the entrance, shifting on her feet, like she wasn't sure if she belonged here. I folded my arms and waited. Finally, she took a deep breath and walked toward the counter. I got a job. I raised an eyebrow. Oh. She nodded. Marketing. It's not much, but it's mine. For the first time, Samantha didn't look like the smug, self-assured woman who had stood on my doorstep weeks ago. She looked real. Humbled. Changed. I gave her a slow nod. Good for you. She let out a shaky laugh. Honestly? I don't know how you put up with him for so long. I smirked. I don't either. She hesitated again. I know I don't deserve it, but do you think we could be friends? I thought about it. About everything she had done. Everything she had learned. Everything I had learned. Then I gave her a small smile. Not friends. But maybe one day. She nodded, bought a scarf from my boutique, and walked out the door. Starting fresh. Just like I had. At a gas station of Al I had pulled into he looked different. Thinner. Tired. A little lost. For a moment our eyes met. And in that brief second I knew exactly what she got everything. And I have nothing. But what Eric never understood was that I didn't win because I won because I rebuilt myself. Because I refused to let him take my future the way he had tried. I gave him and then I drove away. That years later, my boutique expanded into 3 more locations. I had new friends, new adventures, a new life. And for the first time ever, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's moving on.
An bạn đã nói, bạn hãy viết cho tôi đoạn kết hay hơn và sâu sắc hơn Chad đã nói. Here's a more powerful and deeply emotional ending for your story. That year passed.
Seasons changed. And so did I. My boutique expanded 3 locations, then 4. My life became filled with new friendships, new dreams, and new beginnings. The weight I had carried for so long, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the need for closure, it all faded like dust in the wind. Not because time healed Everett, but because I healed myself. I built something that was truly mine. A life that wasn't defined by what I had lost, but by everything I had gained. One evening I sat on the balcony of my home, a glass of wine in my hand, the city lights flickering in the distance. The woman I used to be, the one who had begged for love, for loyalty, for an Eric? He had become not for years. I thought revenge meant watching him suffer. Seeing high revenge was knowing that I no longer cared if he did. I glanced at the framed quote on my desk, the one I had chosen for myself long ago. Sometimes the best revenge is forgetting they ever mattered. And as the stars str, because for the first time in my life I was truly completely free.